Hello and welcome to my review of F.Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, a 1925 novel that you are likely, or will be likely, forced to read in school, and I apologise for that. The story is set in 1922, 4 years after the First World War, and is narrated by Nick Carraway, who is a friend or acquaintance of most of the people involved in the story, including the eponymous J. Gatsby, his next-door neighbour, and a figure, initially at least, shrouded in some mystery. Carraway and Gatsby live outside New York on a peninsula called West Egg in the novel, which is home to new money, unlike the nearby East Egg, which houses what you would loosely term American aristocracy. Carraway visits his cousin Daisy and her husband Tom on East Egg. Tom is a domineering figure from a family of considerable wealth, but their marriage is troubled mostly by his consistent womanizing. At dinner, Nick also meets Jordan Baker, a golf player who will become his love interest in the novel. Returning home, Nick distantly observes his neighbour, trembling, reaching across the water to a green light on East Egg. Gatsby is the subject of numerous rumours, even at his own parties, centred around his past, and many of them suggest links to the Germans, including being related to the Kaiser or even a spy. The mystery continues to build, even though Nick, as narrator, and looking back from the future, obviously knows the truth. He's withholding it until it's more expedient. Gatsby, through Jordan, requests Nick arrange a meeting with Daisy, who he met before the war and had a brief relationship with 5 years before the events of this novel. Nick complies, and the two, after a reunion that is a masterpiece of relating human awkwardness, begin an affair. Tom learns of their relationship and arranges a showdown in a New York hotel where he and Gatsby argue over Daisy's feelings and future. Daisy, presented throughout as rather shallow and fickle, stays with the money, breaking Gatsby's hopes and dreams. Daisy and Gatsby drive home from New York and are involved in an accident with Tom's mistress Myrtle, whose traumatised husband seeks revenge. This novel is not long. This edition is 173 pages, scarcely 3 times the length of the 50-plus page introduction, which I did not read, and includes a few pages of notes which are not always especially useful. For example, the definition of bootlegger is surely unnecessary, and the newspaper called Town Tattle gets an explanation, but only after it's been used a couple of times already. And when they drive away in an uncapitalised Victoria, there's no mention of what actually that might be at all, though a quick Google does reveal this, which further commoditizes the female in this book. But if you're looking for a feminist reading of this novel, I'm sure that you'll be able to find one already. I don't feel like I need to go into that a great deal here. But the obfuscation of the notes mirrors the efforts of our narrator Nick, who begins page 7 by telling the reader, and this text is overtly metatextual, referring to itself as a book that Nick is writing. He claims that he's honest and not judgmental, but also refers to Gatsby as representing everything for which I have an unaffected scorn, and further reveals that this novel will be his personal, perhaps myopic take on events 2 pages later, when he says, "Life is much more successfully looked at from a single window after all." What is this of role models, Midas, Morgan and Maecenas, reveals a delicate balancing of reality and story that permeates the novel generally. From Gatsby's crafted persona for himself and for his love interest, to Nick's potentially biased narration and its inclusion of information from other sources that he would have no knowledge of personally, Fitzgerald further blurs the distinction with his description of New York and its suburbs, including many real places, but some fictional, and some, like the East and West Eggs, that have had their names changed, potentially to protect the innocent, perhaps to damn them. It is a narrator that spins the mystery around Gatsby through 3 chapters before introducing the man himself. The mystery, though, continues to build, and probably my favourite scene in this book is the car journey that Nick and Gatsby take, during which Gatsby relates his past to a clearly dubious Nick, but then awkwardly throws in some slightly less than convincing, but I'm still going to call it proof. And that all adds to the intrigue and retains this ambiguity around the figure of Gatsby. It certainly helps to hook the reader in, but it is the position of Nick as the author and arbiter of the story that allows Fitzgerald to play fast and loose with his prose in a way that probably a more traditional author-narrator relationship might make awkward. Nick is both a restricted and restricting observer, and he's also both an observer and a participant. For example, in chapter 3, Nick attends Gatsby's party by invitation, reaffirming his status as an outsider by telling the reader that people were not invited, they just went. Indeed, the chapter is 2 pages and 2 tense changes old before the first appearance of the narrator's pronoun I.
And I would say a lot of the best sort of first-person narration is where that that very obvious eye does recede a little bit. You know, it's not always there. It comes up. Sometimes I can read a book that's first person, and this whole, paragraph after paragraph of, description, interaction, and then the eye comes into it, and you think, I think that's really clever. If you can weave your kind of narration without it, it's quite a clever thing to do, really.
The opening details the extravagance and expense of the unseen host, but the distancing backed with some distinctly purple prose. In his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths among the whisperings in the champagne and stars. And that lends proceedings a dreamlike or fairy tale-like quality that is even shattered at the stroke of midnight when the singing of a celebrated tenor is replaced by a notorious contralto. The seedy side of the party then begins to assert itself. It is also at this moment that the Great Gatsby himself is revealed, and if you did watch that video that we made on repetition, here is how you do it. Gatsby is later revealed to be merely a facade or impression of a gentleman, and all the information you need to set that up is here. Gatsby isn't the only one picking his words with care. Nick and/or Fitzgerald are doing the same as well. The flip side to this staggering amount of authorial effort is that sometimes it shows through as just that. There's a great deal written and said about the novel's symbolism. Some is more subtle and well handled. The various descriptions of scene lighting, the occasional use of pathetic fallacy, lend this a really cinematic feel, something that Hollywood has actually fairly recently completely failed to emulate. The green light on Daisy and Tom's dock represents the unattainable, Daisy herself, the enchanted, the illusion of her that Gatsby is really chasing, and of course metaphorically the American dream which Fitzgerald also critiques as equally unattainable but far more corrupted. I became aware of the old island here that flowered once for Dutch sailors' eyes, a fresh green breast of the new world. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. Yet at the same time, Gatsby's attempts to turn back 5 years on his relationship with Daisy are obviously doomed. While the awkwardness of their reunion at Nick's home is handled well at first, the imagery of the broken clock here is surprisingly heavy-handed. It's partly because the broken clock serves no purpose to the characters, and it's partly because it appears neither before or after that makes it stand out for the wrong reasons. In a novel full of subtle foreshadowing and imagery, generally, this passage seems rather like a clumsy, look how smart I am from the author. I've heard it said that this novel, as short as it is, feels even shorter due to just how much Fitzgerald packs into each scene. It is a clever novel. The mystery around Gatsby in the first 3 chapters is really engaging, and contrary to the suggestion that it feels shorter than its length, I suggest it actually feels far longer. The prose, occasionally on the purple side, is generally so rich that it is far richer and denser than some novels that are far longer. Certainly some of our current crop of authors could learn a lot about quality over quantity here. The problem with that is that if you aren't interested in the jazz era or love stories about millionaires and snobby girls, then there isn't really anything here for you beyond the power of its narrative form and style. And therefore I think that forcing this on school children is probably tantamount to some kind of cruelty. Allowing them to mature as people and readers will probably help them to actually enjoy this when they choose to read it. You can contrast that with a previous statement about how much can be learned from studying rather than reading it. It's an important novel generally, and it's extremely well crafted, but it isn't a terribly exciting one, and once the mystery surrounding Gatsby's past is revealed, either insightful commentary on the state of 1920s America, or it's a story about a simp. I appreciated it rather than liked it, which makes it hard to recommend. I think the intertextual imagery of Leonardo DiCaprio or Robert Redford as Gatsby will make it appealing as a straight romance in certain markets, but young boys looking for a textual role model should probably try some Desmond Bagley instead. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one if you click the like and subscribe button. Bye.